So, unlike in Russia, where intellectuals had debated ideas of Marx and socialism for decades, China didn't have a Communist Party until 1921, and even then it was tiny. It only had 60 members. They were really a small movement. They existed only in larger cities along the coast. And while the Bolsheviks overthrew a pretty feeble provisional government, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, faced a much larger army that was really well equipped and run by Chiang Kai-shek. This is the Nationalist Party. It's often called the Kuomintang, which I'm sure I just butchered horribly. So I'm just going to call them the Nationalist Party. These folks, the nationalists, enjoyed the financial support of a large landowning class. They enjoyed industrial development. In 1927, Chiang Kai-shek launched a campaign of anti-communist terror that killed lots of CCP members, drove them out of all of the major cities. Because of this, the Chinese Communist Party recognizes that they've got to rely on peasants in small villages, places that are far removed from the control of the Nationalist Party. So again, this isn't the ideal social context for Marxism, right? It's an area that has not industrialized. But the CCP works there, and they exploit tensions between peasants and landowners. They engage in lots of public works projects, developing roads and access to water, and they end up building a peasant-based guerrilla fighting force. And when I say guerrilla fighting and guerrilla warfare, I mean folks who are intimately aware of the geography of the area that they live in, have ties with the local community, and don't wage any type of large-scale battles. The CCP works for years on this guerrilla warfare, and in doing so, they gain lots of experience in warfare and then also lots of years of experience governing provinces and villages in these rural areas. It's during this period in the countryside that a guy by the name of Mao Zedong rises as a charismatic leader of this really struggling Communist Party. And he exploits the advantages of guerrilla warfare and sees peasants as a revolutionary force. And so he spearheads a radical revision of Marxism in China. In addition to exploiting peasant-landowner conflicts, he and the CCP make a very serious effort to recruit women by challenging a lot of the patriarchal aspects of rural society. And while there is a bit of pushback to this, the CCP becomes a real liberating force for Chinese women. In 1937, Japan invades. And as they do that, the Communist Party grows in size and importance. At this point, its membership jumps to the millions from having been just 60 in 1921. It has tons of soldiers in the Chinese Red Army and militias, and their strength really lays in, or resides in, the type of warfare that they had developed for years against the Nationalist Party. They were able to operate very well behind Japanese lines in Chinese territory. And the Nationalist Party, in contrast, tends to retreat deeper into China. It forges stronger alliances with landowning classes. And in many ways, they seem more concerned with fighting the Communist Party than they do with the Japanese. So because of that, the Nationalist Party loses a lot of its legitimacy, the CCP's credibility rises, and in 1949, when the war with Japan ends, there are 4 years of struggle between the Communist and Nationalist parties, but eventually, in October of 1949, Mao's CCP declares victory in Tiananmen Square. This victory, now we're talking about from 1921 to 49, really comes because of its support base in the countryside, its track record in the war against Japan, and eventually its superior organization.